Hello and welcome to season 5, episode 9 of the Voilo podcast, which we have taken 20 minutes to begin recording for reasons I've been unable to gather.
I have decided that every Friday I'm going to be super joyous at 11 o'clock. So I have conditioned myself. So it doesn't matter what's going on. My brain is just switched on
Yeah.
happy hormones. I'm just like,
Yeah.
pumped.
I am happy that we are back and recording this podcast now that the SAG-AFTRA strike has been resolved. We were kept away from this podcast for so long, thanks to our union.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Sapna Perikal, thank you so much for telling me that there is also a union in India. I'm going to look into it whether we have this centralized fund, which is something that I was very, very fascinated by, because if you're an out of work actor or if you need to get residuals and stuff like that, I think it comes from that fund in itself, right? I think they paid to the fund and then it's paid out to the actors. Anyway, so what have you been watching, Anand?
So, since our last podcast, I have
Mhm.
traveled to South Africa. I have watched movies on 2 long flights. I have been stung by a wasp. I have celebrated a birthday by watching India win in the semifinals.
What a gift! What a gift!
Yeah, yeah. And surprisingly, not been watching any large show, but I have been listening to some very long podcasts by Lex Friedman and suddenly realized that long form podcasts are fun to listen to for 3 to 4 hours.
Yeah. I've been listening to Jinn Stories, which is by Rabia Chaudhry, and it is fascinating production. The stories are great. It's a lovely listen on a run or a walk or something, and she's a very soothing voice. And she talks about jinns, right? Like
Yeah.
genies, and the mystical and what's happening in all parts of the world about this jinn kingdom. Apparently, the myth is that it uh, it exists alongside us. It exists alongside humanity, and how there is sometimes a lot of interaction between welcoming or non-welcoming human entities as well. So a lot of these stories, and she has this beautiful, soothing voice that really sort of draws you into the myth and the mystique of the narrative. I love
Is
it.
this the same Rabia Chaudhry who was
Yes.
Adnan Syed's friend?
Yes, from
My
Syria.
goodness, podcasts have come a full circle. She has her own
Yeah,
podcast.
she has her own podcast. She and her
That
husband
is amazing.
produce
That is
this
amazing.
podcast.
So, what else are you watching these days?
I have begun to watch Kalapani on Netflix. It is a fantastic production. The writing is a little bit up and down. Suddenly, in the middle of it, you feel like, hey, you've introduced a new storyline altogether, and I'm kind of lost. But then they quickly pull you back in with all the intrigue and the mystery and everything else. But I think this will travel. The It's not going to be only an India specific show. I feel like how we watch Narcos, I think this could
Yeah.
travel. This could definitely travel. This could definitely have a lot more international audiences rather than just the diaspora that's watching it on Netflix, because the concept of what they have picked up is a universal concept, right?
Yeah.
And so I think everybody will identify with a mysterious illness on an island, and then what happens then, right? So, and all the survivalist thriller genre is all the rage now. Started off with Lost, if you remember. Remember Lost?
Of course, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great writing, fantastic casting. I mean, in that show, you literally hate people. You want to slap people, because they just irritate you and get under your skin, and you're like, oh, and then you're like, hey, man, these are just actors, but they do a really good job.
What
The
fun.
other thing I was telling you before we started out the podcast is I'm reading this article on New York Times Magazine. It's called "How David Zaslav Blew Up Hollywood," and it's a
The
really
most hated
long,
man in media.
apparently, and
Yeah.
for many reasons, I'm sure, mainly because I feel like he's an outsider and he really didn't know how to sort of hold himself within the within Hollywood and how the way things are done, quote unquote. And Jonathan Mailer, James Stewart, and Benjamin Mullen have jointly written this article. It's massively wrong. At least I think so. It's extremely heavily commented on. It's been shared widely, but it feels like it's a short story. And sometimes, while you're reading this, you're thinking, "Is this real, or did this happen, or are they just, or am I reading a story?" Right? Because it just
Yeah.
reads so fantastically, and uh, I started reading it yesterday. It came out yesterday and or day before, and I just couldn't wrap my mind around all the stuff that this man has gone through. Right, David Zaslav, and it's we started talking about him when we started this podcast, and when he came in, when they bought WBD, and they
Yeah.
were trying to reduce costs, and they pulled Batgirl off the floors, and they ruffled so many
Yeah.
feathers, and that was just at the almost at the peak of the pandemic and things like that. But it's a good insight into leadership, the lack of it, the tone deaf aspects of how sometimes leaders behave, whether they're in Hollywood or not, um, and how somebody's adulation for to want to belong to a particular tribe, right? He clearly wants to belong to the halls of walk the halls of the Hollywood greats, and what you would do to sort of get your way in. I mean, we've seen many shows about it as well, but reading a real life take on what actually is happening, what happened up until now, is eye opening. And I feel, I'm sitting so far away from everything. It still reads like a story to me, but it's somebody else's. It's true life for somebody else. I don't know how he's holding up. I don't think I
Yeah.
would be able to hold up.
I mean, I have a similar take on Elon Musk. I was listening to the Walter Isaacson, who's just published Elon's biography, which my friends Ani and Preeti just gifted me. She's going to take me a long time to read because I am a very slow reader of books, I will admit. But it's the same thing. I mean, the early chapters about his childhood, and he's been through so much. And seems like the entire world, of course, is itching to bucket everybody into good or bad, and he's been put in the bad bucket. But there's an interesting sort of opening line in this book where Elon says, "To anyone I've offended, I just want to say, I reinvented electric cars. I'm sending people to Mars on a rocket ship. Did you really think I was going to be a chill, normal dude?"
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah,
I do believe that's something that all of us have to sort of sit back and sort of think about a little bit. And none of these guys are chill, normal people. I mean, if they were chill and
yeah,
normal, they would be doing chill and normal things like us.
yeah,
And so also David Zaslav and all the chaos that he has created, unbeknownst to him, clearly, he seems to be very chirpy about whatever he's doing so far. So anyway, so the South Africa trip. I know that you recorded a beautiful podcast with Famida and Rani when you were there. What
It
are the
was very
highlights?
inspiring. The podcast was very inspiring. So let me break down the trip for you as well. So first of all, our colleague Niju traveled with us, and he had to put up with my bickering about T2 Bangalore and the Abu Dhabi airport, both of which I do not like. And everyone has talked, waxed eloquent about how great T2 is. The international side of it was quite boring. There wasn't much to do. There's a lot of cane and a lot of greenery and a lot of fountains, which is fine. But there's not much to do. There's only one bar, which is that Irish pub, which I hate.
Was
It's
it
like
the same one? The same one that we take off for domestic as
the
well?
exact
T2?
same one.
Oh no.
And there's not much else. There's like two cafes. And I went up to one cafe and I said, "Can you make me a coffee?" And he said, "No."
Why?
She said, "We are not taking any more orders." But he wasn't shut either. So I'm like, what is going on? Anyway, so Niju had to bear the brunt of that. What I did enjoy was on the flight, everybody was live streaming the World Cup. And
Nice.
I thought that was nice because when you walk up and down the flight, from the galley or from the restroom and back to your seat, you see the same thing on almost everybody's screen. And the one thing I noticed is there were no ads. There were no ads. Somehow they haven't figured out how to target users who are mid-air, and probably it's too small a cohort to care about. But
Don't
there
they
were no ads.
have don't they have sales on the aircraft anymore? Like those magazine sales, like things to sell, products to
No,
buy? Oh, they don't?
surprisingly, they didn't. They didn't.
Remember they used to sell like alcohol and duty
Yeah,
free stuff, right? Makeup and gifts and jewelry and things. There used to be
and
this magazine.
weird gadgets.
Weird gadget. But did your mom always pick up nonsense on the flights?
Yes, yes.
Nice.
She is the quintessential shopper.
Love it.
Anyway, so we get to South Africa, and it was really nice. They're very our customers are, of course, extremely hospitable, not hospital. Uh, and
This is what happens
uh,
you record from home, Anand.
they are very hospitable, and it was really nice. They really took great care of us. Also, it's a huge sporting nation, much like we are. And more than cricket, South Africa just won the Rugby World Cup for the fourth time, which has never been done before. And of course, everybody from the airport employees to the cabbies to everybody we met now believe that the captain of the rugby team, Siya Kolisi, has to become the new president of the country, of course.
Because
But
he's so qualified. Yes.
yeah, but definitely a spectacular achievement. So the first day was a tech day. So they had a conference where they had invited various people to speak. It's a closed door event, so I won't get into it too much, but I can tell you some of the stuff that they have publicly written about. They had Gary Whitaker from the South African version of BARC or TAM, which
What
is
is
the
it called?
Broadcast Research. It's called the BRC, the Broadcast Research
Okay.
Council, where he was talking about audience measurement, cross media measurement, where the industry is going, the need for cooperation, very similar themes to what we see here. But he was put on the spot and made to explain how a panel that's so small can be considered representative of that many households. And more than try and explain it, he took the route of saying, it's a growing sample set. So we must always look at the fact that the data is growing and the size of the sample set is also growing. So it is enough for it to be representative. Of course, there were mixed opinions. There was Vicky Knox from Imagine Communications, John Francis from Zensar, who was talking about the applications of media data and how it can be used to solve and model various. Tata Alexi gave a beautiful presentation on AI powered content streaming, both plus and minus. And on the back of the writer's strike and the sort of fear of AI, I was reading another article. I know 2 episodes ago we broke down the strike, but there's a lot of punditry about how while the strike has been resolved and Hollywood as an industry can now move on and it will happen again, this is the first agreement that a union has struck around the use of AI, which will set the tone for other unions and other applications of AI in different industries. So it's supposed to be a sort of bellwether for how other industries and other unionized industries look at this.
Yeah.
Ravi Bhatt from Microsoft talked about Microsoft's views on media and entertainment and AI, again, very bullish on their investments in OpenAI. And I had the opportunity to talk to the audience about relevance and what it means to the advertising industry and kind of what we've seen as a consistent theme in successful campaigns. And so that was really fun to be a part of that event. And the following day, we, of course, recorded a podcast with Famida, who's the CEO of DSTV Media Sales. Really fun views on sport, her journey from being a journalist to being the CEO of a media organization, how the business has had to evolve. But at one point, she was also talking about the fact that the African market is actually so vast that it cannot be viewed in a single sweep. There are various countries that are in different stages of their own life cycle of digitization, of consumer behavior, of content. And so it's a very interesting market because it's a very sort of, the fabric across the African continent is very interesting to look at. And South Africa, of course, is one of the leading markets in Africa. So along with that, meeting users, just spending a week in the inside, on the inside of one of our customers in a media organization where you see content in the air. There was a Barbie day, there was a rugby day, there was a football day. It's a lot of fun to just sort of be in the atmosphere of the industry that we are a part of.
Yeah, last time you went was 4 years ago when they were leaving to play there. They were
Yes.
being given a send off to go play the tournament, the rugby tournament, right? And even then,
Yes.
it was larger than life, and with so much rah-rah, and everybody kind of stopped working and came out to cheer them on and things like that.
Yeah. It was a very similar atmosphere this time as well. I missed the rugby team by a day. They were there like a day before I got there. This time, not to leave for the event, but this time they came back with the trophy. So clearly, their association with the organization is very tight.
Nice. This makes you wonder, right? With everything going remote or like partially remote or in between, all of these kind of things take a beating. I don't know the kind of attendance that was there, but I'm hoping that there was like full attendance. But you were talking about the way people work in South Africa. It's very different from how we operate here in India.
Yeah.
They come in pretty early, right?
Yes, it is something that I really want to learn. Majority of the office is in by 7:30, and
In the
then
morning.
in the morning, yeah, and then very efficient and back home by like 4:30 or 5 o'clock.
Nice.
I feel like we are used to atmospheres where we spend longer inefficient hours, and I
Yeah.
aspire to sort of try to time this. Mark Andreessen has written about this extensively, where so between him and Ben Horowitz, he said there was a huge difference in culture. Ben had 3 kids, I think, early in his life, and Mark had kids much later in life. And apparently, the minute Ben had kids early in life, he became the most efficient person. Like he would not waste a minute. Whereas Mark says he was very different. He would work long hours. Now that he's at a later point in life, he views this very differently. But he was talking about the same thing: to be efficient, work more efficient hours, as opposed to have long coffees and go for walks and then spend longer hours in the office. But I saw a team that was extremely efficient. It was very interesting to watch as a culture.
Nice. I was listening to the podcast, The Town, as usual, since I obsess over that podcast, with Matthew Bellany and Duncan Crabtree, Ireland. He got back on the show. He got Duncan into the show just when the strike started. And then when the strike ended, he
Yeah.
got him back for an emergency podcast to talk about the deal in itself, right?
I've never done one.
An emergency podcast. I don't
Yeah.
think we're that pro as yet, but I'm sure that we can do an emergency podcast anytime.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you listen to that podcast, Duncan beautifully breaks down what the entire what they came about they agreed on. Sorry, man, on the contract in itself. Nothing is. They can't reveal anything as yet because it's still up for approval and things like that. But actors can go back to work. Surprisingly enough, or interestingly enough, or ironically enough, the previous podcast that Matthew Bellany hosted was about how, because of the length of the strike, the studios were going to miss the entire slate for summer, right? Because things were not on the floors, actors were not acting, studio lots were empty. And so now, with this agreement in place, people have gone back to work. We know that the Oscars are being hosted again, but I'm really wondering what's up for next year, right? Because how fast can you actually shoot? And what agreement have they made on AI? So is it going to make it faster or slower, or are they going to make some money on this? Because you will have to use some AI, I'm assuming, to move this along faster than it would be otherwise using human beings and coordinating with people, right? So since we're now approaching the end of our annual year, what are your predictions for next year?
Last year in December, we did a run through of our favorite top 5 or top 10 predictions that came from various trade publications that we read. And as we hit December of this year, we will do that again. But I am very bullish on 3 things for next year: AI, CTV, and retail media. I know that 2023 was pegged to be the year of all 3, and it most definitely was. But I think we're just getting started. I am eager to see what the SAG-AFTRA terms were. I haven't read them yet. I haven't gotten access to it yet. But if you look at what happened in the writer's strike, it's not like they came to a consensus around how AI will be used. What they did was guarantee their own jobs, have a minimum number of people. But I don't think they had any consensus. How can you have a consensus about a technology that's changing so rapidly, right? With actors, I think it's a little more nuanced because they have to protect the fact that AI can generate their likeness, and that can potentially be a questionable IP. Is it Tom Cruise? No, it's not. It's AI generated Tom Cruise, so I'm not going to pay you, right? I'm sure that there are things to be worked out there, but again, I'm pretty sure they would have tackled it through a different route, like they did with this. That being said, the rapid pace of development in AI, I think, will continue in 2024 and will have a huge impact on our industry. So for me, what I'm really looking forward to is AI. I don't think CTV hit the kind of levels it wanted to hit in 2023, but I definitely think Like we predicted last December, the year of CTV will take a decade.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested in sort of the trifecta of these three for next year.
Yeah.
What about you?
I agree with all your 3 points, and I think all three are like it's going to be the era of all of these three, right? It's going to be many, many years of them evolving, and our industry is constantly evolving, like we know. But what I think next year is going to bring with it is two big things, right? In my books, which I'm going to look out for, is the chaos of the elections. We have India elections and we have the US elections. And I just recently read an article about how Facebook has said, of course, we're going to allow political ads. What are you talking about, right? Because earlier they were all about not showing you more than a specific number of political content to
Yeah.
a particular user. They were trying to make sure that you were not heavily influenced or targeted. Now it's all under the First Amendment of free speech, and
Yeah.
hey, advertisements are definitely allowed. Meta has definitely made a lot of investments in their metaverse, which hasn't really panned out extremely well for them right now. Maybe it will in some years, but election season is definitely a time for everybody to mop up those advertising dollars here as well as in the US.
Yes.
And the second one is because of all of this and the whole like speed and velocity of AI, we're going to be smacked with a lot of issues on regulation. And I feel like people are going to come in to question why there are no regulatory practices. Policies are going to be questioned. People are going to be writing up new policies that can be used maybe in the next election or any other kind of similar event. But I think you have to kind of go through chaos to get to the other side. And then when you get to the other side, you take along with you what you learn through that chaos and never waste a crisis, so to speak. So everybody's expecting it. I'm sure everybody's like bracing for impact. But once an impact has happened, I think we're all going to get up, dust ourselves and say, okay, what have we learned from this? And then try and corral ourselves into making some better policy, better regulation, understanding our inventory better, understanding where we can get better premium inventory. Because even with CTV is also plagued by the same issues as programmatic is plagued by today for display and as well as text, right? And CTV, everybody's only focusing on the fact that it's the largest screen in the house. But what are you paying for? Are you paying for actual premium inventory? Are you paying for actual inventory that's being watched, that's liked, that's being paid for, whatever deems that content premium against which you are advertising, or the audience which is premium because they have that kind of purchasing power? All these are like big issues, but I feel like because the elections are going to sort of turn up the volume on it, there's going to be like a lot of noise.
No, I agree with you. In fact, the more I think about it, these are two landmark elections for many reasons. One is, of course, on the geopolitical side, we are potentially at the cusp of the start of a new world order, and whoever's at the helm in both India and the US is going to be steering two large ships towards that direction. And I think it's even more sort of important. Two is the role of media. 2016 was all Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, the controversies, the accusations of external interference that sort of brought a non-politician into power in the US. 2020 was the year of Twitter, right? Again, a media company that has been around for a while, but they famously sort of took down Hunter Biden's post and famously sort of banned Donald Trump from Twitter. But at the end of the day, you can definitely attribute a lot of that election to this platform. And now Twitter is owned by Elon Musk. So this is an election with the start of a new world order, with Twitter becoming X, with this entire sort of cast of characters being AI powered, in a moment where the result of both these elections are going to be very important, both in India and the US. So I think both the importance of the elections as well as the role of media, as well as how AI plays a role, is going to make it a very interesting, but also a very sort of powerful year for everybody as well as for our industry.
Yeah. Speaking of new world order and power and fall from that power and all of that jazz, yesterday Anil and I were having this conversation in office about streaming. We were talking about streaming becoming expensive, and if you look at the way the costs stack up for streaming, right? You have so many underlying costs that you have to take into consideration. And this is something that a lot of people did not pay heed to when they were first starting out. They only want to bring Netflix down, or they wanted to make sure that they had consumer consideration along with Netflix. So they priced themselves lower than Netflix. They gave it out for free. They did a whole bunch of stuff, and they invested a lot upfront on streaming. And now they're both feet in it, right? And the whole world has moved to streaming content. But if you think about it, it's so expensive. Server costs, making sure that you're able to scale. We saw a concurrency of 54 million on the India semi-final cricket match. I don't think that number has been hit anywhere in the world, right?
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful stream. The three of us were chatting away. I know that mine was for that one out, for that one wicket, you guys were 1 second ahead. Your cartwheel emoji came in, like, and I was like, what happened? And then my TV kind of caught up. But otherwise, there were no glitches. It was beautifully streamed. Even the ads this time, although I'm watching a match after years, right? The ads were not that bad. They were pretty memorable. There was one ad from Colgate with this guy, with this surgeon with his bed tied to his back. Did you see it?
Yeah.
It's quite memorable, and you are a bumbling fool, right? When you haven't really woken up as yet. And of course, the other one, which is the worst ad ever, which I can never remember the brand of. What is the engine oil ad? Who's the engine oil?
Max Lubricant.
Max Lubricant. Oh my God. They're such terrible ads, but Anil believes that's great advertising because everybody remembers it. But it was terrible. But they did a good job.
But for me, it's the importance of context, right? That ad was shown again and again while India was struggling, and therefore I didn't like the ad.
Yeah, that's true. I got irritated in the middle because I was like, "What is this ad?" But it was a funny tongue-in-cheek ad, and I can imagine how the creative agency may have presented it to the client, saying, the insight is that you must give as much importance to your engine oil as you do to regular decisions in your life. Like, where are you going to send your child to school? Chalk and cheese. But anyway.
I have believed this for 30 years. Please do not try and get cricketers to act. Please don't. Please don't. It has worked very rarely.
It is true. But I must say that Samsung believes that I am a very rich household because all their mastheads have Jags, like really expensive cars. That's their advertisement for me. And I'm like, I can't even afford to buy myself a regular car. They forget a luxury car. And so I'm kind of getting the gist of how their targeting works as right now, because if you're going to be spending like 80,000 rupees on a TV, then you should be able to spend, I don't know, 8 crores on a car. I don't know how many crores a Jag is, but how many crores is it? Do you know how many crores is a Jag?
1, maybe 2.
Okay.
I'm thinking about
that's still expensive.
Deepthi Karthik, the marketer we had on our podcast.
Yes.
Who said CTV is a cohort, not a device.
Yeah. Do you know what a cohort is? I read this description between a target audience and a cohort.
I feel like this is a trick question.
No. It was an interesting explanation. So you are a particular age, right? As of now, you belong to a particular age bracket. And then the cohort is when you move and grow along with that age bracket. So your cohort is like the generation that you belong to, right? Because you have certain influences that you bring to the table, therefore the choices that you make and what you buy and your purchasing power and stuff like that. So that's a cohort. So that's why you are called a cohort and not just an age group, right? Okay. Because you
that
get
makes sense.
Influence, which was interesting to me. And I was like, oh, I never looked at it like that. I thought cohort, age group, target audience, all interchangeable. But then it isn't. So you could have people from different age groups spanning, but you'll have a specific cohort because those people have the similar influences in the past that brought them to where they are or are going to take them to where they're going to go. So yeah.
That's interesting.
So that's that I think is brings us to the end of this episode. Unless you have anything more to say, Anand.
Yes, by the time we roll around to the next episode, the World Cup finals would have been completed.
What are your
Where are you
bets?
going to be? What is your state of mind? Are you excited about it? Do you not care about it? Where were you on this?
I'm going to be watching it at home. It's one of our dear friends' birthdays, as you know, on the day. And I'm hoping that I'm not as nervous as I usually get because, see, I'm not as into sports as I'm into winning and losing, right? Where India is concerned. Like, I'm not into the technicality of the game, or I'm not saying, oh my God, like Virat Kohli played so beautifully. I'm like, did we freaking win or did we lose, right? Or are we winning or are we losing? So I'm only looking at I'm looking at the like required run rate, and I'm looking at people like, are you giving me the excitement that I require? So I'm one of those kind of cricket watchers. So I'm a little nervous about how everybody else is going to react to my chaos, because when I was watching the semifinals, my daughter kept saying, you keep yelling and I keep studying harder, or like sitting up straight, because I keep thinking
Yeah.
you're yelling at me. So yeah, it's
I
chaos
get
in my
into it.
house. Yes.
I get into it. I mean, I watched the last few games at home, and I find that I am appealing to the umpire along with the players.
Yes. Have you jumped off your sofa and shouted at the
Yes.
screen?
I jumped off the sofa, I've shouted at the screen. I have sat inside my son's playpen because it's a safer environment for me. I've done all of this.
I have
But on
run to catch the ball. Okay. I have gotten
Yeah.
up saying, oh, yes, you can catch it. But
Yeah.
he has dropped
Yeah.
it.
So Famita talked about it last week on the podcast, because I asked her, I said, what is it about sport? People are paying exorbitant amounts of money for the rights, making a loss. This is not making financial sense anymore, but everyone is still fighting to have it as a part of your portfolio. And she said, yes, that is the power of sport. It is the only form of content that can bring out a different version of every single person on the planet. And it is evident here as well. So the thing, I watched every game at home, but on Monday I'm going to be in Coog. I'm there for a wedding, and I'm going to be watching this in the hotel lobby, hopefully with a bunch of strangers. So that should be fun.
Nice. So I don't know how we segued into this conversation, but we started off with the fact that streaming is an expensive investment, right? And the conversation that I was having with Anil, and you kind of hit something else, hit on a note which I was like, we haven't finished that topic. But essentially, in the next couple of years, something has got to give, right? In terms of making it sustainable. Now, is electricity going to become cheaper, or is computing going to become cheaper? Are there going to be more options? Or is content going to suffer? Like the cost of content going to suffer? Because Anil was of the opinion that he said, if something's got to give, then the cost of content has to come down. Because if the technology driving it is going to take up so much time, effort, and investment, because all of this is running on natural resources, which is why they're talking about sustainability in advertising as well. How are your servers run? Somebody is pumping electricity there. Electricity is probably coming either from nuclear, or if you're in countries like ours, we're burning coal somewhere and generating electricity. We're cooling all our servers down with water and any other kind of electricity that can be used to cool those servers down. We are using pipes that run across the ocean bed. There is a lot. The internet is extremely physical and very, very expensive to keep up. So the only thing that you can control are human beings, I think, and the cost of how much you acquire content for and how much you produce content for. And so I think it could be apocalyptic if we have content become cheaper. But Anil believes that this kind of these exorbitant rates of acquisition for content for sports would probably be questioned, because you're not making that kind of money anywhere in entertainment or on the sports side or on your stock price, right? It's not like you are actually making that kind of upside. I don't know whether I'm getting the math wrong or whether I'm too short-sighted. I'd love to have another opinion about it, but I'm wondering what something has got to give. Something has got to give to make this a lot more sustainable.
So I think you're absolutely right. We have probably over the last few years already seen some collateral damage as a result of this. But I do believe that the economics of content will get better. With the better use of technology, costs will go down. I read a stat the other day, which I didn't realize, which is that over the last decade, Netflix has doubled their prices on the consumer end, slowly, gradually. Because at some point, if the economics of any business, any value chain start to get strained, those costs will be passed on either to intermediaries or to the end consumer. And not to all end consumers, but using innovative business models, tiered models, freebies. Um, um, I forget what they called in the movie industry, but there's a similar word for this, right?
Concessions, is it?
Concession. Yes,
Yeah.
right. It's what happened with airlines. Why is it that today we pay for seats? I was on flights last week. I had to pay for every seat, and I didn't mind because the thought of being stuck in the middle seat because I stuck to some weird principle and didn't pay was too scary. So the minute the seat booking opened, I booked myself nice seats. And so that will become normalized. There was a point where everybody was up in arms and saying, how can they charge me for a seat? This is bullshit. I'm going to write a change.org petition. Doesn't matter. Consumer behavior will change because at some point that normalizes the business model and makes it move towards sustainability, if not completely sustainable. I think that is a sort of myth. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But something will give along the way if it doesn't move fast enough. And that's either going to be consumers bearing the brunt of it or organizations falling by the wayside who couldn't figure it out or didn't have the coffers to last through the loss making years. I think that's how it works out. It's also why there's such a high barrier to entry, right? You and I can today buy equipment and start creating content, but we, with no historic capital, cannot start a new content company, which is why the most successful content companies in the world today are either legacy broadcasters who are spinning off digital arms or media organizations because they have the coffers to take a few loss-making years
Yeah.
for a while. So I think the economics will get better because of technology, because of better models. But along the way, it won't be that somebody falls by the wayside in a very large, tangible, palpable fashion, but it will be these small increments. The costs will go up, the pricing will go up. There will be slightly lesser content than yours. There will be fewer blue sky bets. But I think it will find its way because at the end of the day, we've talked about this before, consumer behavior will take industries in that direction. And I don't think we are going to change. I don't think we're going to be like, okay, no more streaming on my device. I'm going to go back to linear. Not necessarily. We will
I know,
look to have all
like we
choices
said,
ourselves.
that genie's out of the bottle. I mean, that's not going to go back. Okay. So on that extremely interesting, insightful note, we come to the end of today's podcast. We've covered South Africa. We've covered Cricket World Cup, what's going to happen next year, which is going to be, a continued conversation as we see a lot more predictions coming out from all our journalists, friends and publications that we follow. If you have any predictions that you want us to talk about, please write in. And if you want to join us on our podcast, DM us on LinkedIn, ping us on our Instagram page, wherever you find us, and we'd be happy to get you on to the podcast. It's been a long time, Anand, since we have had this podcast recording. You went to South
because
Africa and
the week before I went to South Africa, I made a fuss and said, I didn't feel like recording.
yes, and then you went to South Africa and recorded the podcast, and now we've come here. So anyway, this has been great. Thank you, Leena. Thank you, Santosh, and thank you, Gautam, who's going to finally edit this entire video and put it up somewhere. Thank you, Anand, and thank you, everybody, for listening. Bye.